Welcome to the Film Trooper podcast, empowering filmmaking entrepreneurs.
Hey, welcome to the Film Trooper podcast. Yes, this is the podcast where we empower you, the filmmaking entrepreneur. And a great way to get started is to get the book, How to Make and Sell Your Film Online and Survive the Hollywood Implosion while doing it. It's available in paperback, Kindle ebook, as well as an audiobook. And in fact, you can get the audiobook for free when you go to survivetheimplosion.com. That's survivetheimplosion.com. Hey there, and welcome to another Film Trooper podcast episode. And today I have a returning guest. It's filmmaker Thomas Lim. He's from Singapore, and he discusses with us what's it like to create projects for China and grabbing U.S. talent to help build out projects for China. I think some of it might be very interesting to you. Now, I have to apologize for the audio quality of this episode. For some weird reason, when I updated my Skype preferences, it defaulted to my computer audio and not my my nice microphone that you're hearing right now. So on my end of it, it doesn't sound that great. And then the other side of it is that for some reason, Thomas's audio kind of like bounces in and out a little bit. You can still hear it, but it's not as great as the quality is that we've had before. So I just want to give you guys heads up before that. And without further ado, here is my guest, Thomas Lim, who is in charge of all development and production over at Sun Entertainment Culture Los Angeles, here on the Film Trooper podcast. So, Thomas, it's great to talk to you again. For the listeners, we had spoken about 2.5 years ago on episode 84. So if anybody wants to go back to filmtrooper.com/84, they can listen into the first episode that we met and we talked. And that was during a time I was doing these things called Film Marketing Fridays, which were to explore online marketing strategies for filmmakers. And it was a little bit like a Q&A session. And the title of that episode was called "What is Your Unfair Advantage?" And that during that time, the idea is that in the marketing speak, they're always looking at an angle to find what makes the product or your service or your offerings unfair to your competitors. I mean, that's a good thing. Like, you want to exploit what you have as an unfair advantage. And you had just come off making a film called Roulette City. You're from Singapore, filmmaker, and you were on this cusp of like making the move to Los Angeles and wanting to know how you can exploit your unfair advantage while you're in Los Angeles. So since then, a lot's happened. So I would love to just hand over the mic to you and share with us what's transpired since the last 2.5 years since we last spoke.
Cool. Well, thank you, Scott, for having me again. I'm Thomas, and I'm from Singapore, but I live in Los Angeles now, so I'm Chinese Singaporean. Singapore is where Crazy Rich Asians was set. So that's like, so Singapore has kind of become a more popular place in America because of Crazy Rich Asians. People think about that film when they hear I'm from Singapore now. So a couple of years ago, I moved to Los Angeles, and that's when I first spoke to you, Scott, and that was a bit of a transition. I would say a bit of a hard transition to make because I'm a foreigner and I need a visa. So ever since then, I've gotten my green card. So that's all good. And many things transpired. And at the time, I had just finished and released my first film, Roulette City. Ever since, I've made a second film called Sea of Mirrors, which has just finished. At the same time, I became the head of Sun Entertainment Culture, which is a Hong Kong company here in Los Angeles. So I'm heading operations here in Los Angeles for the company. And we're a Hong Kong company, and we have a slate of 12 projects now. I'm looking for writers, I'm looking for producers, and development is strong in Hollywood, and which is why our boss, Alex, he wants to develop his projects here, at least for the writing part.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's the summary of what happened.
Yeah, no, so we can unpack that a little bit more. It's actually interesting. I saw like a Facebook post of yours sharing like an article about how Crazy Rich Asians didn't do very well in Hong Kong or China, correct? Because of was it because it was a romantic comedy as opposed to an action movie, or what was your thoughts on that?
So my opinion of that is actually romantic comedies do really well in China, especially local Chinese romantic comedies. But my opinion of why Crazy Rich Asians didn't really do well was because of its late release. It's released like 3 months later than the US. And I think by then the Chinese audiences who wanted to see Crazy Rich Asians might have already seen it somewhere else.
Ah,
Yeah. And
no, okay.
for the longest time, we all just thought that Crazy Rich Asians was never gonna get released in China. So if I were a Chinese audience in China and I wanted to watch Crazy Rich, I would have found it somewhere else by then. 3 months is a long time. Like they need just 3 hours to find it. Actually, maybe.
Interesting. Okay, that's. I was just curious because I thought it was an interesting. I mean, because you mentioned it so that everybody has a context in terms of the American audience to understanding where you're coming from, and then but to hear, like that it was a hero domestic phenomenon. A lot of people loved it. It was a fun movie to watch, and it was really neat to see an all Asian cast.
Yeah.
And I think they were really good about being all Chinese cast, if I'm correct. So it was really cool. But go ahead.
No, I was just going to add that also Crazy Rich Asians is not really very Chinese because it is set in Singapore. A lot of the actors are Asian Americans and it's completely in English. And actually there are some British Chinese and Australian Chinese in the cast members in the film. So I think that's another thing that maybe the Chinese audience don't really relate to that as much as they thought they could have.
Interesting. I noticed that like the movie Black Panther, people from the African countries that went to see it, they loved it, but they all were like goofing on how bad the accents were. Yeah. So I wanted to get into what's very interesting because we talked about, again, the first time we talked about the aspect of the unfair advantage in marketing. Yeah. And how unique it was for you to be, a Chinese Singaporean filmmaker coming to Los Angeles. So now you have something that's unique in Los Angeles. Like I said, it was a little difficult being, getting your green card and working as a foreigner in the United States. But I think it's fascinating because I see through your Facebook posts, I would love to unpack a little bit more, if you can, whatever you can reveal to us in terms of your meetings with Netflix. What it is that Sun Entertainment culture in Los Angeles, what they are looking for in terms of development, and what has your venture been, being basically overall in charge of that division, and just sort of give an insight for other filmmakers to kind of live vicariously through you in that respect.
Sure. So speaking of the unfair advantage, I think I made full use, and I think I made good use of that in 2018 when that was how I landed this job, because this job needed me to speak Chinese and also to understand Chinese and be in LA, sort of know the American Hollywood culture, and also someone who's culturally kind of similar to the people in the Hong Kong headquarters, essentially our boss Alex. So I fit all that. And Alex is a close friend of mine even before we started working together. So that was trust already. So that worked out really well for me. And I think it's the best opportunity I could find here in LA, because I think I'm quite sure I'm a little bit too old for an entry-level job at a Hollywood studio. And people my age have had a lot of Americans my age would have had a lot of Hollywood experience, which I do not, because I'm coming from another culture. I'm coming from another world. So in that sense, like thinking back to the first time we spoke, I think I made good use of my unfair advantage of being Chinese and being here in Hollywood.
Yeah. And let me ask you, when you made Roulette City, what sort of things, what kind of doors opened? Just because since you made it, what things were there doors open that you didn't think would be open? Unforeseen doors that kind of led you down this path to Sun Entertainment culture?
So actually, Roulette City was my first film. It led to me making a second film called Sea of Mirrors, also set in Macau. So Macau is a territory of China. And when I was making Sea of Mirrors, during post-production, I ran out of money, as many productions do. So I wrote a proposal to try to raise post-production funds. And this proposal actually landed in the hands of my boss, Alex. And that was how we met. Yeah.
Well, I think it's fascinating because, of late, the past two guests I've had on the podcast, there's like a different perspective after these years, is that sometimes I look at films, a lot of filmmakers, when they finish it, they're like, well, what do I do? Am I going to the film markets to try to sell it, trying to get a distribution deal? And then after that's done, then my whatever people that I owe, financiers. They're just part of the system that maybe they'll get paid back or maybe they won't. But then I'm on to my next project, which I have to leverage my old project on to say, hey, I need to raise money for the next project. And it's interesting because there's sort of like a mindset of perhaps when you make a film, you don't necessarily have to get it to the audience right away, in a sense that maybe one of your first films out there could be used as leverage to market it to influencers or other like producers that may want to hire you or work with you in some other capacity, maybe as a director or writer for another project they have in the works. And it's interesting kind of how that worked, because as you were getting funding for Sea of Mirrors, that you said that it opened up a relationship because somebody saw what you were doing, and there was then this opportunity of, would you like to be overall in charge with this our Los Angeles division? And I think that's important for other people to listen to, because it's like there's you have to start someplace. You got to create something, because once you create something, you never know what doors it opens, and flipping the concept of what our films are about or how we market them or the value that they have might be a lot different than just the straightforward, we made a film, we have to get it to the audience. Maybe there's something else to it that has value that maybe you can think about. What have you seen in terms of other filmmakers? Because now that you're in charge of like development per se, these meetings are happening in Netflix. Again, I don't know how much you can divulge for us, but can we live vicariously through you what it's like to go to a meeting in Netflix and what the vision, like, because obviously not all Netflix meetings are the same and not all with the same executives, but what's your takeaway on that?
So actually, I've met a lot of people. I started doing this late in the summer last year, and then I've met, I would say, like more people over the past 5 months than the last 5 years, something like that. Because now I represent the company, meet them, and the doors are slightly more open to me. I've not only met Netflix. I've met the big agencies in Hollywood. I've met a couple of studios, and I pitched to them. I introduced to them my projects, and and we talk about potential collaboration, and they're interested in the Chinese market. As much as Hollywood is a little bit skeptical of Chinese market now, but they're still very interested in the Chinese market. So basically during the meetings, I show them my projects and I tell them what I need for the projects. I have 12 projects of a higher priority than 5 others. They are mainly of the action genre. There's one romantic comedy. There's one comedy. So far, no horror, but I think a horror is coming because horror doesn't sell in China. So our first and foremost target audience is the Chinese audience, because that's our specialty. We have co-invested and be the main investor in 40 films over the past 7 years in Chinese films. And that's how we learned how to make films, the company. That's how they learned how to make films back then. And a couple of years ago, we started to become the main investor of our own films, and we've created a franchise called SPL. So SP and L stands for 3 different Chinese words. Made 3 films of SPL right now, and we are thinking of making more. We want to make more, and SPL can take. I mean, the films of SPL can take place like anywhere in the world. It could take place here in America. So we're looking for writers to do all that, and because we are at the time and still now we're new in Hollywood, so we need referrals. We talk to agents. We talk to our friends in the industry. That some of them were referred to us by our Hong Kong friends in the Hong Kong industry. So in Hong Kong, like everyone knows of us. We are seen as, in my opinion, we are seen as a real up and comer because of the young energy that we bring to our films and the fearlessness that our boss Alex brings to his approach in working with people, and that I think the industry, at least in Hong Kong and in China, really appreciate. And all Chinese audiences know the SPL franchise, so the Hollywood side would need to do a little bit of research to know that we are legit, because that's what they're worried about. Art. And once they're convinced of that, they start sending us their writers. We read samples and we hear pitches from them, and then we start to hire them. So it's been the past 5 months have been a lot of learning. It's been a steep learning curve for me, because I've never produced somebody else's films. I've only produced my own film so far, but now I'm in charge of producing these 12 films. So So basically, that's what transpired. And meeting Netflix was actually happened in Singapore. So I'm from Singapore, and so I was in Singapore the past 6 weeks because it was the Christmas holidays here in Hollywood. Nobody's around to meet me anyway, so I took the chance to go back to Singapore to visit my parents, and I had meetings in Singapore. So the East Asian hub of Netflix, if I'm not wrong, is in Singapore. So I met people there. We talk about licensing our projects when it's finished. So that's basically how what happened. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. There's a lot there. I wouldn't, if you don't mind, I would sort of like unpack a little bit other, little snippets in there. Like the first thing, writers, in terms of, if I understand correctly, are you looking, is a need to try to find screenwriters that can interpret or, not interpret, but make an American version of the IP that you guys are creating, or you need to take the stuff that's in development and have specific writers that know how to write for the Chinese market? Are you looking for both?
We would prefer that the writers have knowledge of Asia. So that has been a challenge to find, because a lot of writers here in Hollywood, they are fundamentally very sound in terms of structure, in terms of, just structure basically. But a lot of them do not really know Asia. Even the Asian Americans don't really know Asia. They know more than the regular American, but then in my opinion, still not enough to capture the nuance of like the content, the stories. So one approach that I might take soon is to pair an American writer with like a local Chinese writer back in China, so that the local Chinese person can punch up in terms of nuance, whereas the American writer can oversee the entire structure and make sure that it's structurally sound. So we're very interested in Hollywood writing in terms of how structurally sound it is. And in my opinion, Hollywood sort of has taught the world how to watch movies in terms of structure. So subconsciously, we absorb how a movie structure should be, because having seen Hollywood movies all our lives, most of us, even out east in East Asia. So but we are also looking for, those writers they can be of any race, as long as they know a little bit of Asia, or preferably, or if they don't, then we are very interested in them. So that's where kind of me and my colleague Ivana come in to maybe tell them a little bit more about how the local culture in China or in the Chinese world actually work, to help them capture a bit more of like the nuance of the stories in China. And actually, go ahead.
I was going to say, what is it that you think that what is American audience or American artists, as they're trying to write for or create content for China, what is it that they might miss? Like, you just kind of like skimmed up a little bit that horror genre does not necessarily do well in China. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit more about what here in Western United States do we get wrong about understanding the culture of China in terms of entertainment?
So even before we talk about the culture, I think like censorship is a big thing in the Chinese market, in terms of if you want to release a film in mainstream in China. Censorship is a huge topic. There's a lot of things that you cannot touch on in China. So for example, like supernatural horror is a straight no. In my opinion, it's because China doesn't accept anything that science cannot prove. So, for example, if you are doing a supernatural horror thing, then maybe at the very last scene you have to say the protagonist was mentally ill and he imagined this whole thing. But that takes the fun out of a supernatural horror.
Interesting, film. Yeah.
And then horror films in general are a little bit risky. So, be it slasher, be it monster, be it about demons, it's quite risky. So you never quite know if your film will pass the censors until it's finished. So that would be a risk for the production company to take. That's one thing. And then, so basically you don't talk about corruption, and you have to be quite pro-government. And also, so let me give you an example. Like, for example, in the past, the Hong Kong industry was really strong in the past, in the 80s, in the 90s, and maybe the early 2000s. They were making hundreds of films a year in tiny Hong Kong, where there's only 8 million population. And the Hong Kong, a lot of the biggest Chinese directors and actors of today are still came from that era. So they are in their 50s right now. Back then, they were in their 20s and 30s. The directors are very good at doing zombie films, supernatural horror, gangster films, and also like films that say like the top guy in the police force was actually the mastermind of the whole evil scheme. So they were really good at creating stories, these kind of stories. But these are basically all banned in China today. So when they go to China, so in the about 15 or 20 years ago, when they first entered into China to try to make a second career for themselves, they had problems because they couldn't compete with the local mainland Chinese directors who are so familiar with the local culture of what happens north to the Yellow River being different than south of the Yellow River. And the Hong Kong directors are not so knowledgeable or in terms of that part of their mainland Chinese culture. So mainland China and Hong Kong is still a little bit different that way, although today, like politically, they're one country. So that's another thing, that's another big challenge. So back to your question about how the American writers sometimes get it wrong. I think it takes knowing the language and living in the Chinese world for extended periods to really know the culture. Just like if you want to know any other culture, be it Japanese or any other place in the world, you would have to live there for quite a while, like really interact with a lot of local people and preferably know the language, because culture is hidden in language. So once you know the language, you sort of automatically know the culture as well. But there are very few American writers that I've met who have actually done that, or in fact, none of them have actually done that. They might have visited China as a tourist. I don't think that counts. So when they don't do that, they rely maybe on Googling information. And if they do that, then for a person who actually knows the Chinese culture, when they read the script, they would know that it's very surface. And the Chinese audience will also obviously know that. And the Chinese audience might be turned off by that. So like, for example, I spoke at the WGA trying to get writers for my projects, and they were asking me, so when you say, they asked me, Thomas, when you say you want writers with Asian knowledge, like what does that mean? And my answer is, I would prefer the writer have like Asian knowledge beyond what they can Google. Yeah,
beyond what they know from Google.
Yeah, but that might be a lot to ask. I know that might be a lot to ask. So I'm willing to like also work with writers who have the passion and the interest to write for a foreign market, especially a Chinese market. And for me, I'm looking for that, so that they would sincerely work hard and really try to understand our point of view when we give them comments about their outline, or when we can give them comments about their script, and not think that their version is actually the version that would appeal to the whole world.
Right. I have a friend who's a screenwriter, professional screenwriter, and they just flew him down to Mexico to do. They're developing like a Mexican sort of Netflix series of something, but they were having difficulty with the Mexican writers. Not, they just need some better like just overall story like sense and story structure. So they brought this American down, and so he's working, like you said, like you kind of mentioned earlier, working alongside a Spanish writer. A Mexican writer too, so that they can make sure that they get a little faster in terms of getting these scripts out for the series. So it's fascinating that way. But every culture and every country has they're tackling it however way they can, and it's fascinating that Netflix has their East Asian headquarters maybe out there in Singapore, because Netflix has been, in the sense, we were in Paris in Christmas and getting a chance to see, when we brought our Apple TV with us, connecting it, we can see like right away we had our options in the French account was different than an American account, and you can see like how Netflix is like, we can just go global, but now we're looking for original content that's very specific to the markets that we're in. Is that sort of the conversations that you had when you had a chance to talk to them?
Yes, we already knew that before we talked to them, that Netflix really wants to cater their local content to the local audience. And for example, like Netflix in Japan is really strong. They are creating a lot of very popular TV series that appeal not only to the Japanese audience, now appeals to international audience to some extent as well. So they are very careful about that, and I think that's the right way to go.
Yeah, no, it's sometimes here in the United States we'll see, like, if you have a U.S. Netflix account, you'll see some crossovers, or at least Netflix will try to suggest some crossovers of like a series that was made in Sweden or Germany or something like that, which is really interesting because it's going to be very interesting in the future when if Netflix has this massive content library of literally the global cinema, and then when your account can search and grab that or be introduced to these other content creators in other worlds, it'd be really interesting. I do enjoy seeing cinema through sort of like the really sort of uber independent filmmakers from all over the world, because you do get a slice of life that or a perspective that you don't normally see that gets Hollywoodized or you know what I mean. It's nice to see like kind of like see how they see the world or how see their little slice of the world, and it'd be fascinating to see where it all goes.
Absolutely. Yep. I agree.
Yeah. So what other things that have you discovered that have opened your eyes, or things that were interesting to you that you didn't know about when 2.5 years ago when you made the move from Singapore to Los Angeles, or things that, or any sort of advice you can partake to other people that are thinking about making the move themselves?
Well, I think the big thing, like we discussed about, is to have your special, your unique kind of skill that you bring to the industry, because Hollywood is so packed with talents. And
yeah,
I do not think, I do not think a person, especially coming from overseas or even another part of America, I don't think the person can easily succeed just because he or she thinks that he or she is talented.
Mm-hmm.
Because for every thing that you could do here in Hollywood, probably there's at least 100 other people who could do it better than you, and those people work really hard, or even harder than you. So it is about opportunity, and also it is about like bringing that unique combination of skills or unique skill that you have that is of value here in Hollywood, that would get you maybe your break into the industry. The first 2 years, even after getting my green card, the first 2 years was really tough because maybe because coming from overseas, like I knew nothing about how Hollywood functions.
Mm-hmm.
The regular person coming from East Asia would also know nothing about how Hollywood functions, because Hollywood functions so differently than any other industry that I've worked in. I've worked in the Japanese industry, I've worked in the Chinese industry, but Hollywood is so different. The first thing again is there's an abundance of talent here, so you can't really succeed just based on talent. And then the social norm, the social culture is also different here in America than where I was from. And at the beginning, I found that kind of hard. Like I can grasp the I can understand the sense of humor that Americans use, but I cannot continue the joke. I can laugh at the joke because I'm so familiar with Hollywood movies. I've watched them growing up, so I know where certain things are supposed to be funny, and I truly find them funny. But I do not know how to continue. I do not know how to joke back. Yeah. So, and I think that, to me, as time went by, I find that to be a flaw of mine, that I'm not familiar with the sense of humor. I'm not familiar with maybe how certain social events kind of work, but then I'm gradually getting familiar with them. And the big thing still is to bring your unique set of skills or experience to the industry that is of value to them. Because I think people in Hollywood do not really care too much about what happens outside of Hollywood. There are of course people who there are of course people who do, but then majority of people in Hollywood are still very obsessed with success within Hollywood.
Right. Yep. It's fascinating you just brought all that up, because just the other night I was talking to my wife about the level of talent in Los Angeles is absurd. And my friend Alex Ferrari from Indie Film Hustle mentioned that he moved from Florida to Los Angeles many years ago, and he says if you want to throw yourself into the den of like just pound for pound, everywhere you look at, there's somebody who could do it all, like act, dance, sing, whatever, write. It's just amazing, and either you throw yourself and just be part of it to get better, and to compete and to better yourself. But if or if you wilt and wither, you can get swallowed easily because there's so many talented people. And you're right. I have friends from Los Angeles that always say it's very hard to date in that city because everybody's there for their career. It's like it's understood when you're dating that you might have to break up and date up for your career.
Right.
But you mentioned the bubble, and I remember that there is this vortex that it feels like there's stuff going on all the time, or like everybody's got something going on, like they're on the verge of something breaking, and it could be like a false victory for sure, and you kind of have to try to get your head around like the bigger picture of things, so that you have your BS radar up, so like, is this person just full of it, or or are they really moving someplace, And sometimes the hapless luck happens all the time in that city, and and some people that just sort of luck into it, and you just have to be like, oh my God,
Yes, absolutely.
But it is good to break away if you can. It's fascinating about this city because I noticed that natives of Los Angeles, people that have grown up there, that maybe not they have like one foot in the entertainment industry, but they have other things going on. They seem to be the sort of more the mellowest, unaffected people in the city. The ones that are like heightened the aspect of what they believe Hollywood should be is usually people that come from all over the world. So you have to kind of imagine like it's all the 1% of all your drama kings and queens all coming together in one spot in Los Angeles. And so they are sort of playing up what they believe the Hollywood experience is supposed to be. But the people that actually live there in their entire lives, you can kind of tell like they're unfazed by a lot of it.
But I will also say this, like through my observation, I think like people who are native to Los Angeles, which is not so many people. So a lot of people in Hollywood come from, especially all over America, and sometimes all over the world. The reason why all over the world, I mean, in terms of overseas people, is they find it harder to come into Hollywood. One of the bigger reasons will be it's difficult to get a visa to live here, to work here. But when they do come, and if they're not native to LA and they do not really have family here, so the sole purpose of them being here is to break into Hollywood. And I've seen that perhaps like they have like a bigger fight in them because they know what they already know. Some of them already know what they're up against before they even come here. So they might last a little bit longer, and they have sort of no distractions because they don't really have too many friends or they don't really have family here. So they might last a little bit longer. That's what I've seen. Yeah,
interesting. Now, also, I noticed that a side thing, that, mental health and sort of like spiritual health. If I'm correct, did you start surfing when you were there in Los Angeles?
Yes. Over the summer, actually, because my boss Alex was here. He was here for 10 weeks actually over the summer, and a lot of things happened, and I ended up staying with him in a huge house that he rented, and that's how we developed the projects that I have on my slate. We were together all the time. We were talking about projects, and then he loved surfing, and he brought me along, and I grew to love surfing. That was why I started surfing.
Yeah, no,
I like it very much. Yeah.
Now, I only asked that because I've been surfing since I was 12, and one of the caveats of moving up to Oregon was just whether I could still surf, and I surf all the time up here, so it's just different. The coast is gorgeous up here. It's just big. Everything is just like big cliffs, big sand, big animals in the water.
Wow. Okay. We should surf together sometime.
Definitely. So is there anything else that you wanted to like maybe talk about that I didn't ask? But I think this is really insightful. I think a lot of people are going to want to know, first of all, like maybe if they can contact, are you guys at Sun Entertainment Culture, are you guys open to unsolicited submissions of writers in terms of help? Now, I understand that you need writers to possibly help flesh out some of the projects you already have in place. It's not like you're bringing on any new projects, because you mentioned that you have 12 projects ahead of 5, like you have 12 priority ones, but you do need people to help get those things developed further down the line. Let me know how would people want to get hold of you if they think they can help in that respect?
Sure, I'm open to people emailing me. So my email is thomas.lim, which is my name, thomas.lim at SunEG, SunEG meaning Sun Entertainment Group, Sun as in SUN, suneg.com. So thomas.lim at suneg.com. So basically right now, do not send me ideas of your projects. I mean, like, to the writers out there and to the producers out there, because basically I'm just developing the projects that I have on my slate, which is our projects. We want writers to write them, and we also want producers to produce them. Hopefully the producers come with their own writers or come with their own team. And we would prefer that the producers have strong credentials, but we're open to seeing like any kind of writers. Hopefully they are living in Los Angeles, because I would like to meet them after we read their sample and think that they are good writers. Because I believe that when we work with a writer, it's at least like a year long, if not more. And when we work with a writer, we will hope that the relationship, the working relationship goes well, and we would hope that they would continue to write for us. So I'm open to reading samples. Hopefully the writers live in LA so that I can meet them face to face. And we do not want to do outside projects, not as of now. Maybe in the future when we work with a writer and we have such a good relationship going on, and we really admire the writer, and maybe the person is a writer director, and maybe we want to produce his or her next project. But that's something for the future. At the moment, we just want writers to write our projects, and producers help us make our projects. A lot of our projects would probably shoot not in the US, because it depends on the story content. But we have a couple of projects that's set in the US.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll grab all your information too and put it in the show notes. So again, everybody listening to this will probably be on filmtrooper.com/15. Let me see what number it's going to be. Sorry.
Sure.
I want to make sure that I'm putting it in correctly. Yeah, this will be episode 157. So it's just filmtrooper.com/157. And then I'll put all your information there as well. So that'd be easier for people to get hold of. Cool. Anything else before we we can sign off?
Well, nothing much. I mean, I'm going to Sundance. Actually, I'm flying off to Sundance today. So looking forward to having a good time there. It's my first time there, so I'm representing the company to essentially meet more people. One of our good friends, Justin Chon, he has his film competition in Sundance, so we're really happy for him. And,
good.
Yeah, so I'll see him there, and I'll join his parties, and hopefully get to meet a lot of people there, and maybe find the writers that I need and collaborators that I need for my projects.
Yeah, definitely. And if I forget to, if I didn't ask a question, that somebody was listening, going, "Oh, why didn't you ask him this?" Again, just check out the show notes, and you can ask, Thomas directly, because I might have missed something.
Yep, I'm open to that. Yep.
Yeah, so it's good. Fantastic. It's great to hear from you, and it's wonderful to see your journey. Like I said, we reconnecting with past guests to see where they were when we first talked, and putting the work in and seeing where it transpires from there. It's really fantastic.
To make film, because my second film was shot entirely on the iPhone because I had no budget. But then my second film is called Sea of Mirrors, which is the one after Roulette City. I went for like 4 or 5 years without being able to get another film off the ground, and I decided to shoot it on the iPhone in the community that supports me the most, which is in Macau. So I think like when filmmakers want to make their film, in my opinion, they should go where they have the resources to make the film, even if the film is to be shot on a low budget. And because of that, I met my boss Alex. That leads to this. Had I not done that film, had I not started shooting, and I not went into production for Sea of Mirrors, even though I was not properly funded, then it wouldn't have led to my job today.
That's fantastic. That's probably the biggest takeaway from all this. Is like, when in doubt, dig deep into what your heart says and just make something. Wherever you're at, just make it, because once you make something, it becomes real in the world.
Yes.
And you never know where it goes from there. Just like all these opportunities can just open up from that. But if you don't make anything, then it's just nothing will happen for sure.
Yeah. And I think like also I would like to tell like maybe the listeners that perhaps there's another approach to making films than what Hollywood tells us we should do. So I totally agree that a good script, a fundamentally good script, is the best way to start making a film. But then the way I made my films is I look at the resources that I have, I put them together, I try to create the best script to fit my resources. And because of that, I've always been able to like kind of get films going, even though they are of a lower budget. But also because of that, the scripts are kind of flawed sometimes. But then at the end of the day, I believe having a film is better than having no film, because your goal is to make a film as a filmmaker, not to write that perfect script only.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have to do whatever it takes to achieve that goal of making the film.
Yeah, definitely. And the more you make, the more you go, oh, wow, okay, I can do better next time. Or it's like, oh, you know what, that worked, that didn't work. All right, you know, it's you're still developing your skill sets.
Yes.
You know, and yeah, it's
and you're meeting new
fantastic.
people along the way. You're meeting new people along the way that you would never have met had you not started making the film.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Great. Well, it's
All right.
fantastic connecting with you.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you again.
No problem. And I'll be in touch. I'll follow up with you when this episode is up and running,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll go from there.
Okay, cool.
All right, Thomas.
Thank
Thank you.
Film Trooper, empowering filmmaking entrepreneurs.